now is Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, we did hear from Congresswoman Dingell, and we got her reaction. She had a number of points that she wanted to make. One of them I want to get your reaction to. She said that not a single Republican that she knows wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. She also said it has translated to less money for many Americans. I want to get your reaction to those statements, sir.
Well, I don't think I'm the only one that wants to repeal Obamacare. In fact, I just came from an event where Ted Cruz just said that also. So that's two of us, and within a few miles of where we are right now. No, I'm for the full 100% repeal of Obamacare. I'm for ripping it out by the roots. I believe that it is a malignant tumor that's metastasizing and feeding on God-given American liberty.
Okay,
just to be plain.
Say that, sir, but so, how would we do that? How would we go about doing that?
Well, the first thing is, we passed by legislation in January that is the full 100% repeal, and I have made the argument for a long time. Win the argument on full repeal. A separate discussion then is the things we need to do to improve health care in America. And it's a tragedy that we've been sucked into this multi-trillion-dollar abyss of Obamacare when we could have been actually improving doctor-patient relationships, allowing people to buy insurance across state lines, providing full deductibility for everybody's health insurance premiums, setting up systems within the state so that they can take care and address the pre-existing condition components. This list goes on and on, but we can't get to that because they want a state-sponsored single-payer program, and on balance, the American people are not the beneficiaries of Obamacare. They've got along fine before they met Obamacare, and will get along fine without Obamacare.
Okay, that being said, the Supreme Court did rule in favor of the subsidies, and it came down to 4 words in the Affordable Care Act. You believe they made the incorrect ruling?
Well, I think it's an incorrect ruling. If the statute enabled the states to set up exchanges by virtue of those 4 words. But those 4 words didn't include the federal government. They didn't include the Chinese government. They didn't include the Canadians or anybody else that might want to come into America and provide health care. I actually don't think they do. But I use that to illustrate that words contain limited to the states. And I think I'm consistent with any plain reading of this statute. And I would ask the Supreme Court, how should we have worded this if we wanted the states to be the exclusive providers of the exchanges?
Okay, I want to change gears now because there was another huge ruling on Friday. And we know that the president, he made comments after we learned the Supreme Court same-sex marriage legal across 50 states. I want to hear from the president and then get your reaction. Take a listen.
Okay.
Oh, okay, unfortunately we do not have it. Live TV, as you know. So I want to get just your reaction to the decision that came down on Friday that now all states have to recognize a marriage between a man and a man and a woman and a woman.
There comes a time when the Supreme Court has gone overboard and gone beyond the bounds of the Constitution itself. They've made up things that don't exist within the Constitution. I've said this, that I'm not going to abide by an edict that comes down from 5 judges, 2 of whom had conducted same-sex marriages in their private lives in their spare time. They should have recused themselves. And when you think of when the Supreme Court has done to try to reorder domestic life in America, I would say Dred Scott, they made a mess out of slavery. 600,000 Americans died in the process. They ripped prayer out of the public schools in 1963. We abided by that decision, and our moral structure in this country devolved. They promoted also abortion on demand in 1973 in Roe versus Wade, and nearly 60 million Americans have been aborted because of that. And now we're watching them as they decide to redefine all of human experience, the thousands of years of marriage ordained by God and ratified by the civil governments. And so I'd say to the states, take a look at why we need civil marriage whatsoever. What tool is it for us to order our society if the Supreme Court says you shall do it our way?
And if I'm not mistaken, you want to introduce legislation to do away with civil marriage, but how would you get support for that?
Well, I've asked the states at this point, go examine your state statutes, see what benefit civil marriage actually has as opposed to holy matrimony that the churches provide. Marriage started in the churches. and was essentially mirrored by civil law so that they could reward marriage between a man and a woman. It was not conceived otherwise. So the states need to go and look at their state statutes and see what benefit is left after the Supreme Court imposes this order. But from my standpoint, I'd say this, that I do not have respect for this decision. If I had any power not to abide by it, I would not abide by it. And I think it's time for the American people to reject a decision of the Supreme Court and say to them, as Andrew Jackson said, if that's your order, then you enforce it.
Okay, Representative King, thank you so much for joining us. We now have both sides of the story. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.